Hello, Cardano fans and fans in the making. We are all united in a common quest to make our world function better. And when I'm thinking of the most dysfunctioning places in our world, those are, the government bureaucracies. In this session, we will explore some initiatives which are positioned to actually improve how things are being done today by even challenging the very notions and concepts of government and nation. These concepts come actually from the Roman times, so they are, to say the least, a bit outdated. So the dictionary definition, the origin of the word nation comes from natio in Latin, which became in Italian nasci. That would be kind of originally children of the same birth, which became a human group of the same origin to be defined as a nation. The term state comes from status, or manner of standing, but the definition of a state is a nation organized politically under one government. A nation state is a state ruled in the name of a community who identify themselves as a nation. Oh man, I feel like we are going in circles. We definitely, are suffering. Not we, but the world is suffering from a lack of imagination. And these concepts definitely do not serve us anymore. My trailblazing panelists are going to challenge these concepts by asking or by answering a few questions that are meant to spark our imagination. Can a nation be bonded not only by kin, but also by a common quest, as we here on Cardano are bonded? Can we envision better rules for a novel societal operating system to serve we, the people, a bit better? My panelists have approaches which range from a gentle transition to a radical shift, rewriting the rules and doing away with everything that was done to date. And we are here to not only follow their projects and learn from their work, but also to support them wholeheartedly and concretely with our technology. My podcast is also here, I want to announce it again, in order to deepen into such conversations with such trailblazer and block changers, as we call them. The podcast Dreamcatcher, Dreams Come True on Cardano, is a platform for such trailblazers to present their projects, their vision, and inspire all of us to make this world better. My first panelist, Alexia Hefti, as far as I see her work, and I may be, challenged by her, but this is my perception, is positioned for a gradual transition. I think maybe she still believes that the nation-state structure of our world, and actually, besides the fact that we have other nations, like the First Nations and tribal nations, and so on and so forth, and nations which actually don't have an identity, which Manmeet will talk about. But Alexia, I think she still believes that within the current structure, she can work with the current system and the current governments to make them more organic and enable them to better serve their citizens. So Alexia, tell us a bit more about your work and how and what drives you, and how, especially, what is mostly dysfunctional in the current government structures, and how your work is making them better.
Thank you, Dr. M. That is a lot of questions. I didn't realize that I would be the gentle transition person. I just can't wait to hear from the other panelists, since they're the clear radicals in all of this. Dr. M, you started your message with something so important, the nation state. And although I am maybe the gentle transition, I would like to say that In 2010, I was sitting at the International Criminal Court's international proceedings. I used to be in international criminal law. And it was fascinating because there was a delegate there that was representing one of the North American countries. And he said to me, "The nation state is dead." And I remember with my grand aspirations, I was going to be working for the United Nations, and I was so excited. And as soon as I joined the international organization, all I heard was a lot of blah, 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 blah. And nothing was happening. I had a bit of a radical transformation in leaving that world behind and in saying perhaps these international organizations and governments as well, I did work with governments as well, don't seem to be making the changes that I hope and wish for us to be able to make. And when I discovered and worked through previously at Deloitte, in my position at Deloitte, essentially found the technology that is blockchain, I thought to myself, wow, this is something that I really hope governments are going to grasp, understand, and utilize to give us, the people, more power. Now, I think you were right, Dr. M, in saying that I may be of the gentle transition in that what I'm doing is holding these governments' hands and taking them along the journey. A lot of that is education, Dr. M, and you know that because you've been in a lot of discussions with the governments that we're talking to. It's about helping them understand that, you know, the work that we're doing and moving towards the vision that we have will only make nations stronger. I don't know if that'll be the nation state necessarily, but more a responsive government to people. Because quite frankly, at this moment in time, I would say most governments are not responsive at all to people. And that's a serious problem. So we are working alongside governments, really helping them understand the technologies that we believe will improve voting, identity, ultimately every aspect of government. But I think what's really important, and where, you know, we started this conversation on the nation state, increasingly I see the importance of breaking down the walls of the nation state because resources are transnational. And by limiting everything to the nation state, we're not only leaving out billions of people who are completely left out of functioning within the nation state, but also we're hurting the longevity of, quite frankly, our world. Right? Certain issues like climate change, there's no boundary. There's no real, I don't see a real positive way of dealing with those types of issues in a nation-state context. But
totally, Alexia. And I wanted to underline here as we transition, no pun intended, to the next speaker, that a few, you know, fundamental questions we are asking in this session that are helping us to rethink and reimagine. So what are the rules if we are to write them from the ground up? So I have here a radical shift warrior, I can call him, Barak Ben Ezer, who is actually positioned and wants to rewrite the rules all over. Do away with all what societal evolution has tried to teach us, and we never learned, and rewrite the rules. So Barak, please tell us a bit what got you into this position of, you know, giving up on all what was created before and position your work to offer us, let's say, the Cardano nation, an opportunity to create our nation from the ground up, with new rules, with new laws. Please let us know how these rules would improve our lives as well.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mihaela. Yes, so just as a brief recap, we're working with the Marshall Islands on issuing the first legal tender crypto, basically, and also creating a special economic zone there. And your question is right on point. Why would we do that? So, you know, I started as a coder. It was at an very early stage in my life. And what every coder knows is that it's much easier to start fresh with a blank slate than to start and maintain like a bunch of spaghetti legacy code. So I think we're trying now to start from a blank slate and reimagine how a society can operate. I'm not even saying a nation state, because we don't even, it could work for any type of organization, but also for a nation state. The Marshall Islands is a nation state, and we have a model now that obviously is broken, because it's working only for a very small fraction of the population, and those that the system works for them, they're very happy, obviously, and they have a lot of organizations that their mandate is to maintain this state of affairs, like the IMF and other such organizations. But
exactly.
A lot of people don't want to maintain this state of affairs. They want to have something new because they're left out. So I believe that, like in any endeavor in life, the way to actually change things is to have a competition, to introduce new models into the market. And where we were lacking competition is the nation state space. They're all trying to kind of like converge to the same, I would say, average. What we're trying to offer now is with the special economic zone in the Marshall Islands is a competitive sovereign jurisdiction in the markets that will everything will we say, it's very hard now to go and convince, I don't know, Switzerland or Sweden or whatever, Israel, to go and change everything. So we're taking a piece of state, the Marshall Islands consist of states, so we're taking one state, and now there's a legislation in front of the parliament, and the idea is to create a statehood that will basically have everything built from the ground up using blockchain technology, like voting, as you said, the money itself, obviously, incorporation of companies. So you would incorporate a company and the certificate would be on the blockchain, and all your shares will be automatically tokens on the blockchain. There will be bank licenses in this jurisdiction. So the banks would also be operating using blockchain technology, and exchanges and everything basically that you could imagine. We wanted to work on blockchain.
Yes, Barak. So it seems to me that you are preparing the lifeboat to save us from the current system, which is being disintegrated and collapsing. And this is a perfect transition to my next speaker, because you mentioned this is mainly to serve those who are left behind and who are really not seen and not existent. And Manmeet Singh is supporting an amazing project, and which is coming back somehow, but in a very innovative way, to the concept of nation, to the notion of nation, if I may play with words a bit. So Manmeet is working to give the Rohingya people who do not have identities, who do not have a nation, to give them identities and to give them, a virtual nation, if I am to call it like this. And we, of course, are here to support it with Cardano. Manmeet, tell me a bit about what drove you to this project, and how do you envision us helping you?
Sure, thank you. So thanks for the opportunity and the invite to speak here and talk about the Rohingya project. So I, now for over a couple of years, have been working closely with the team that founded and built this entire Rohingya project that's led by Mohammed Noor, who started this in, I think, 2017. And he himself is a former Rohingya refugee, along with Saqib Sheikh, who's a program director. So this is basically a self-help team that just started to provide just basic human rights to what I believe is the most, arguably the most persecuted and disenfranchised community that is the most overlooked one today in the world, right? That's the Rohingya community. And, we're talking about 5.5 million, 6 million odd refugees that are spread today across, almost 10 countries, where these host countries have been very generous enough and supportive enough to provide them a place to migrate to, But unfortunately, they haven't yet had the chance to integrate into society. One of the largest problems that these guys are facing is ultimately statelessness. They are no longer members of their home state, and they're certainly not fully integrated members of their nation state. So what we're trying to do in the Rohingya project is to focus on a few key elements. The first element, as both, Mihaela, you pointed out, Alexia, Barak, you both pointed out, it all centers around that common fulcrum of identity, right? So we need to create. Now, when you are a refugee, oftentimes, and we see this firsthand now with what's happened and transpired and is continuing to transpire in Afghanistan, but we've seen it before with Yemen and Syria and just tons of places that we've seen this scenario where refugees literally just leave with the shirt and often not even the shirts off their backs.
I left with a suitcase which broke on the plane. so yes, I'm
exactly.
with you. And two babies.
Absolutely. So
yes.
So you understand intimately what we're talking about here. So the project is focused around providing leveraging blockchain, which I have the most fundamental beliefs in, for identity. And then from there to provide education, because that is a key for any community to be self-sustaining and to grow and flourish. From there on, then you get the concept of financial inclusion, banking the unbanked, something that we all at the Cardano ecosystem are very, very vocal and very, very active and focused on. And then from there on, you can bring other binding models and opportunities to bind this community and allow it to have its unique identity and culture, not perish, but to actually thrive and grow.
Manmeet, yes, I want to go the other way around, and I'm going to start with you because it's really, of course, so dear to our hearts, yes, what you are doing on this project. So what are the major challenges in the way of you fulfilling this dream for the Rohingya population?
So I would say, first of all, the biggest challenge at the end of the day is the fundamental question of identity. Without identity, there's precious little that we can do in our daily lives. And if we have an issue with not being able to produce a passport, or in Singapore, a FIN number or something, any one of those local numbers, you can't open bank accounts, you can't get access to literally any service, right? Let alone to migrate and travel anywhere. So if you don't have the identity, you are effectively stuck in your situation, whatever that situation might be. Host country, very generous, brings you in, lets you in. And even if you're no longer living in a refugee camp and you're out somewhere else, but you still don't have a national identity. That's the case, for instance, of the Rohingya population that migrated into India, even my home country. Right? They don't have that national identity for them to be able to then do anything else. So then that itself brings your ability to lead a human life, as we understand, and enjoy basic rights, just doesn't exist.
Absolutely.
It's not a question of
Absolutely.
who's good or bad. It's just it doesn't exist without that. So that's probably the number one thing. The only second thing I would add to that is simply that the other challenge then is the existing government systems and infrastructures and policies and so on, right? Which both Alexia very clearly alluded to, Barak as well. That make it impossible or just extremely an uphill battle for one to improve the lives of
and the current structures like IMF, World Bank, and United Nations, which are all ruled by the nation states. And so I completely agree. So Barak, maybe, I see your project, let's say this lifeboat, maybe bringing a solution to people like the Rohingyas. So what are the biggest challenges you see in your approach?
I think the biggest the biggest challenges I think is first to battle kind of like stereotypes. I think a lot of people in like those organizations that you just mentioned, when they hear about blockchain technology, they automatically think that you're talking about money laundering and financing of terrorism and drugs or stuff like this. It's crazy that they think like it, but that's like literally like this is where you start, and then it's an uphill battle to get out of this rut. I would say this is the number one challenge. And the numbers 2 challenge is the banking system. You still need to have integration between the blockchain systems and the banking system. And banks give you a lot of problems and challenges when they basically understand that you deal with blockchain. Even though you have the best compliance and everything, there's some sort of a stereotype that it's for me, it's really still hard to understand where it comes from. It could be that they really believe in it, or it could be that maybe they see it as a blockchain technology as a competition, and they use a lot of kind of like these stereotypes to try and kind of like put some, throw like a wrench in the wheel of blockchain technology. I don't know, but I would say those are the stereotypes.
Yes, we are confronted with that every day. If you follow Twitter, definitely Charles is battling this battle every second. We're totally aware of this, Barak. So, Alexia, so from all what you heard now about what the world needs and some radical projects, what are the challenges that you envision in your work in order to make it work?
You know what, Dr. M, they're the same things Manmeet and Barak are saying, so I'm just going to reiterate them with examples. Yes. I mean, identity, banking, and ultimately government processes, or the inefficiencies in government processes are all major challenges. On the identity side, right now, I'm primarily working as a partner at the Abed Group. We're primarily working in the Caribbean, and one of the things that's really holding us back is definitely identity. Now, Manmeet talked about statelessness, and that statelessness today for the Rohingya people. But what about the statelessness of tomorrow? If you look at the Caribbean, it is set to be the poorest region by 2050. And moreover, if you look at climate change, a lot of those islands are going to disappear. Those people will be stateless. They will be climate refugees. What's going to happen when they can't even prove their identity because the systems are, quite frankly, completely outdated or not digital, or simply just won't translate to what is 10, 15 years from now, which, by the way, isn't a long time. We've got to get that under the control. On banking has been a complete nightmare. We all know that because we're in crypto. But what about not only the unbanked, but the underbanked? That's not only people, but that's also governments. Living in the Caribbean, now I'm not living there right now, but dealing with the Caribbean, what you see is governments that do not have access to banking, that are de-risked, national banks de-risked, completely cut off from the international, the global, financial environment. And recently we closed up and finished up a business plan for the first national digital bank for a government that is attempting to say, we want to change the way the financial system is working, and ultimately we're going to have citizens own shares in that bank. We want to transform the way banking is done, because we too, as a government, have been left behind. We have been trying to bring in new industries to, essentially transform the way that our economies operate, moving away from tourism and financial services, but ultimately have not been able to get banking because, we want to bring in fintech, we want to bring in these other things. Ultimately, that needs to change. But the last thing that impedes my day-to-day is lack of efficiency. It's absolutely crazy. Yes. I was on a call on Friday, Dr. M, with the head of a regional organization, and he said in his words, this organization is a graveyard of action. And it was just absolutely on point.
I love that metaphor. Yes, I'll use it. I will steal it.
Yes.
Graveyard.
People are not responsive. The civil servants, it's like they should be responsible for their inaction. We should be holding the people in government responsible for not moving forward. And then the last tiny thing I have to say as well, and Dr. M, you will have also experienced this, Barak and Manmeet, I'm sure you experienced this as well, is that sometimes, and I'm involved in a lot of RFP processes, the people to whom you are pitching don't understand what you're talking about. They don't have the experts in the room because they're just some, government officials. And so
I call them hand wavers.
Right. So what you have is governments selecting providers that are not right for the people, that are not right for the future of their nations because they don't understand the content. And I'm not expecting a government official sitting, in an office to understand that. But what I do expect from governments is to bring in the right people. bring in the people who have the knowledge, because they're sitting somewhere in your country, and they can definitely come in to assist to make sure that we're selecting the technology that will actually help us into the future.
Alexia.
Not technologies that are going to hold us back.
I have to say there that, Manmeet's project is meeting exactly that need, and I think what we need there is not only to leave it on the government to decide who the right people are, but also to educate with the people in order to be able to elect the right people. I think that is also crucial. So a few points which you mentioned there, and I could call this, yes, the ideal island on which we all would find refuge with a better government. But since I've been working with Barack on his project in the Marshall Islands, many of the issues which you mentioned with climate change, with, an island nation is facing, and this poverty and the government is facing so many challenges internationally without corresponding banking relationship and so on. So Barack, maybe you want to speak more to that. So I think that's part of your drive as well. And then I will move to Manmeet also to tell us a few things about the educational aspect.
The state of affairs is that the current system is so convoluted, potentially intentionally so, that it's very hard to innovate within it. It's just not built for innovation, the government space, I would say, in a way. So I think starting in a very small nation is a good start. That's why we went to the Marshall Islands. And then even within a small nation, we understood that it's better to just take a state within the small nation and innovate there, because you really want to distance yourself as much as possible from the red tape and bureaucracy and the political machine, and just build things. And as entrepreneurs, I think a lot of entrepreneurs can get frustrated when they come to do something with the government, because yes, it's maybe you could win like a POC and stuff like that, but when it comes time to actually build something, then you really see the real challenges. And a lot of entrepreneurs just say, I don't want to be in.
And I felt that also in Alexia's plea. Yes, that's what I sense, that frustration, of an entrepreneur. Yes.
Yeah, an entrepreneur is somebody that, by definition, has a very low tolerance for bullshit, right? So now put him in a situation. So now put him in a situation that he needs to deal with a political process. You're like you came to create the next Facebook, and now you're doing a house of cards instead. So I think my biggest recommendation is to go as small as you can within the sovereign nations, and then even there choose like a special, like a state within, or a district or something like that. And then once you're able to show the benefits on the micro scale, it would be much easier to kind of like go and scale it up to the bigger and bigger entities. So
still a gradual dislocation. I will move to Manmeet. Yeah. Unless you have, sorry, you wanted to finish something? Because I think that's a perfect thing for the transition. Yes. So still now you see, Alexia, a gradual dislocation. Yes, he is a radical. He wants to rewrite the rules, but let's start small, and then. Then show them that this
Dr. M, can I say one quick note on that? So, Barack, I think you have a really good point. And, our chairman at the Abed Group, Gabriel Abed, actually started with CBDC nearly 10 years ago. And what he did is exactly what you're talking about, is he took it to the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, right, which is, again, a small central bank within the Caribbean, tested and piloted the first CBDC that went live, and then has now graduated to take on a country in Europe and a country in Africa, right? And gigantic nations. And so it's really fantastic. And that's what we've been doing at the Abed Group, is really using the Caribbean as a petri dish to say, let's test out this idea, because realistically, we only have 10,000 people that we need to test this out on versus 300 million or 1 billion. So, you know, you really utilize that, and it helps us as entrepreneurs to really move around and not be constrained by the massive red tape you have in Canada and France. You start small and then you go big.
So from a scientist perspective, seeing that you and Barack are converging, you know, I think, yeah, this is the way to go. For us, it's like, okay, observe, experiment, and okay, so if two of them chose this way, it means, yes, this is the way to go. So unless, Barack, you wanted to say something, I'm going to move to Manmeet. Is that okay? Okay, so Manmeet, now, you know, many things which I heard you, and of course we are working together on this project, which I heard you and our co-panelists mentioning about education, about financial inclusion, about what is needed, yes, for a new nation. But I think in your case, it's also, yes, this new meaning, and actually it's not a new meaning, it's a redefining identity, because in your case, national identity, this origin, yes, has a particular meaning. And of course, for many of us, this has especially for me as an immigrant, and maybe others, and I'm sure many of our listeners, has a particular meaning. So I wanted to ask you, what would be for you an ideal world in which your project is successful? How does that look like?
Okay, thank you. So in an ideal scenario, we're able to, you know, the ideal scenario for us right now is that we're able to provide that identity and that basic access to livelihood for the entire Rohingya community. Now, that governance system, what we're choosing to build it on is on a sort of, you know, blockchain underlying layer. And that is because that will then allow us best to provide the transparency, to provide the inclusiveness, to provide the efficiency, and to provide the effectiveness for the governance system to actually operate in a manner that, you know, maybe slightly different to how Alexia and Barack are tackling their challenges. In our case, you know, we've got, like I said, almost 6 million refugees globally who have been stateless refugees now for 3 generations and going, right?
They are losing their identity, literally, yes, with every generation.
I mean, this entire culture, this entire nation is at the precipice of being whitewashed and just completely forgotten, right? So they don't have the liberty of sort of, you know, patience of trying to convince another government and so on. Now, what you can do is you can, yes, you know, piecemeal, break in pieces, but what I think, and what we think in the entire project is probably most effective is run it almost parallel to the government, right? Mm-hmm. So build that governance system, build those basic infrastructure and human rights facilitators. So identity, education, healthcare, financial inclusion, you build that using the entire superset of benefits and advantages that a blockchain-powered platform can provide. And then once you build a history, a credit history, an identity history, an educational history on top of this, and you have this running almost in parallel to whatever is the existing, you know, life condition for these people, you can now bring this to any government, you can bring this to any multilateral organization, you can bring this to the UN, and now you can show, look, this is what a blockchain-powered governance system for somebody that was completely left out of humanity and the front view of humanity. This is what it can achieve, and this is how it can self-organize, this is how it can self-sustain, this is how it can start to flourish, right? Amazing. Now, you have no more arguments to pick to not take this, right? So do we fight them? Well, it's tough to fight them. We all know it, right? And it's just butting your head against the wall. So why don't we do what we keep you know, espousing in blockchain? We keep talking about, you know, we can build nations and we can bank the unbanked and so on. And why don't we just go and do it, right? And that's where, honestly, from the entire team at the Rohingya Project, Huge gratitude to IO Global for taking on this huge challenge and being willing partners and supporters of this entire project. Before we got involved, honestly, many of the protocols and their leadership organizations and all just didn't want to engage.
Yes.
Or they engaged, didn't want to do anything. Why? Because now you're trying to compete with NFTs and DeFi and stable coins and tons of other, sexier things that might, I don't know, yield better eyeballs or whatever it is. And then this gets
that
pushed
is
down.
back
So
to the
this
challenges, yes, which you are facing.
That's back to the
Yes.
challenge. So you need the right partnerships, you need
Yes.
the right mentality, and the commitment to do it. And that's where Cardano.
Yes, you are an ideal project for us, and as
center.
you know, very, very close to my heart. So Barak, I can see a lot of common themes there. So I'm sure you want to step in and talk to us about your ideal. But I can see a lot of cross collaboration between these projects, definitely, and we are here with our infrastructure and technology to support such collaborations. So Barak, the ideal world for your decentralized economic zone, when it will happen, how does that look like?
I will start that I kind of like, it's hard for me to believe in impact investing and stuff like that because it's not scalable in a way. We aim to create in the Marshall Islands something that has basically an inherent business model. So people would invest and participate because they want to make money, and then the good of the world will be a side effect. And in this manner, we can do it in a scalable manner. We don't need to go and and kind of like ask for donations and stuff like this because people will just join because it's going to be very profitable. So what we're creating there is a special economic zone for blockchain activity. But not only that, the zone itself will have banks that can hold virtual assets as well, exchanges, company registration services, etc., e-residency, all that stuff. The zone itself will have its own token, and so people who are invited not just to come and do their business in this zone, but also to be kind of like owners of this zone. So we are also decentralizing the ownership of the zone and the tax revenue of the zone. So by holding a certain percentage of the tokens of the zone, it means that you are eligible for a certain percentage for the tax revenue from this zone, which is something very novel, I would say, in how kind of like treasuries are organized. Typically, governments only give you, they take the money from you, and we want to say if you own 10% of this zone's currency, this means that you are entitled to 10% of all taxes generated in this zone. And so we want to create a much bigger community around this zone, not just the people obviously who live there, because it's a very sparsely populated zone, but it's a digital zone, a virtual zone, inviting people from all around the world that want to experiment in operating under a new type of governance, blockchain based, not only to be users but also partners in this endeavor.
Owners, yes, like very similar to our proof of stake, which we work with on Cardano. So I'm going to move to Alexia now. So Alexia, please let me know what would be the ideal world that you want to create in terms of course, your work and your perspective on governance, government, nation states. What would you like to create, and how would, I do not know if you want to look at the Caribbean in particular or whatever you want, but I'd like to hear your perspective on this.
Dr. M, I may say something controversial, but first I'd like to, kind of say what Man-Meet and what Barak have said are really important in what we want to create. Man-Meet was talking about creating this governance model that we can demonstrate to international organizations how someone without an identity can then be brought into this network. And Barak's talking about how we can have people who are who also get the benefits of the society in the way that essentially we would love in more decentralized networks, which is what we'd likely like to create for a nation state. What I'd really like to see is these models stand up against the international organizations, because what Barack is doing in the Marshall Islands, all we hear is the IMF saying, no, 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 Marshall Islands,
Yes.
don't do this. We don't like what you're doing with CBDC. Stop doing, the constant struggle that Barack, that we are up against in not only dealing with governments, but governments are up against larger governments, Western governments, international organizations that are saying, no, please don't bank all of the unbanked, because that doesn't play into what it is we're trying to create. I don't want to speak to saying that, we're wanting to keep everybody down, but one could argue that we already have the systems in place to include everyone financially. Yet we're not able to do that on an international scale for a reason. But I'll veer away from that, maybe those controversial comments, and say maybe what I would like to see from a government is I'd like to be involved in micro decisions. So I'm a Swiss, Canadian, Hong Kong resident. I also currently live in the UAE. In Switzerland, it's more of a direct democracy. So 4 times a year, I get to, excitedly open up my pamphlet and vote on 3 issues. I don't know what those issues are going to be, whether it's that cows should be out to pasture 8 hours a day, or whether the tax rate should be increased for the wealthy. But what I would love, because I love getting my little pamphlet and reading my information, is I'd love to be involved in micro decisions. I would love to be on a Friday when I have nothing to do to open up my app and be like, what do we have to vote on today? Oh, great, this random issue about speed bumps. Yeah, why not? I'd love to be involved in that way, in micro decisions in my government. And to speak more broadly as well, Dr. M, and this speaks to an experience I had recently with a government. They selected an identity provider for their nation. And we looked at the solution and realized, wow, that data is being stored in a third government, in a third nation, not in their nation. And I don't think they really truly comprehended what that meant. And imagine you as a citizen, you're sitting there and your information isn't being stored by a government, your government in your nation. It's being stored by another government in another nation, another government, an enterprise in another nation. That's not right. So, when I think of micro decision making, I also think of you, Dr. M. You have a specialization in
digital. We call that liquid democracy. There is a term for it. Yes.
I love it. Liquid democracy. You're able to jump in on this identity. Your team has outrageous experience in identity. You should be able to jump in to have a say, because we wouldn't have made that ridiculous decision that, quite frankly, a couple years from now, we're going to start seeing the repercussions once it's fully, rolled out. And those are the problems you see in small nations that don't have necessarily the funds. Increasingly, we're seeing fantastic projects, particularly in the blockchain space. They're saying, you know what, you don't have the funds, but let us be there and let us allow you to test out this cutting edge technology, because you know what, at the end of the day, it helps us if you also, are able to onboard your citizen, giving them digital identity and all of these other, incredible aspects of a person's interaction with their nation that, quite frankly, a lot of us don't have.
So what I hear you say, from the beginning, do away with what it is there. I want to have a say. So one word comes to mind: a revolution. Yes, we need a revolution in the governance. So yes, I agree now that probably labeling you as a gradual transition promoter was not the absolute right thing. But of course, starting small was probably a better framework to define you. So because that has bigger odds of success in today's corrupt environment. That's how I would call it. When I see my identity, not belonging to another nation, company is like, what's going on? Yeah, there's a lot going on which we do not have a say, and that's why we are working on new modes of governance. So I would like to wrap up. Unfortunately, we do not have more time, but I really would like to invite each of you to have a special segment on my upcoming podcast.
Yeah, I believe that, the world now, we all know, is in flux and in transition. And I believe we're actually going to a good place. and we're going to see though a lot of like pain on the way to this good place. But I think we're going to see a monetary crisis around the world, because since the COVID started, governments are just printing more and more money, and fiat money is kind of like losing its value, as we should expect when they print so much paper. And so I think now we will see the rise of blockchain technology and limited supply currencies, etc. This is now just out of necessity. People are going to have to hold on to something that still maintains value. That's one major takeaway. And the second major takeaway is that a lot of people in blockchain are getting very, very rich in this process. And it's important that those rich people, people who are getting so blessed, will also remember to support and invest in projects and that are trying to better the world, because maybe this is something that is going to really improve the state of affairs. So this is kind of like my summary.
Yes. Thank you, Barak. So I'm going to move to Manmeet now, and of course let Alexia have the last word.
Super. Look, so for me, I think I started my journey in the blockchain space because I was really passionate about the ability of the technology to really transform both industries, governance, and just our entire way of life, and the infrastructure, the core infrastructure in which our lives are currently built on. Everything the vast majority of what's happening in the blockchain space today is centered around financial and capital markets. And I love that. I am delighted about it. I'm happy to participate in it, and I enjoy that immensely. No arguments against that. However, I think it's important for us as an industry to also at some point collectively share some of that focus back into blockchain as a core technology layer that solves tremendous problems and massive problems for humanity, and put some effort into that direction. I mean, the Cardano Nation and IO and Charles and everybody on this team here has been steadfast in that focus and action and substantial action towards it. We need a lot more of our friends in the industry to follow that and try different models so that we all figure out over this experimentation which are the right models for which sorts of problems, and then mass deploy them directly by ourselves, right? Bypassing whatever bottlenecks there are.
And this requires a lot of cross-collaboration. And as I mentioned before, yes, I see your projects working closely together. Alexia, last word, please. Closing statement.
I guess my last words would be, if you're out there, you're listening in on this, you're feeling disenfranchised, you're feeling left out of the system, reach out to us here on the call. You've got Dr. M, you've got Barak doing amazing things out in the Marshall Islands, you've got Manmeet, transforming the identity world. I think the reality is a lot of us can be felt left behind in the current governance structures we have. If you're sitting out in the Caribbean and you're an entrepreneur, you have a fantastic idea that transforms red tech processes, that's what we're doing. Please reach out to me. We want people to take action to ultimately move these projects. We need people who want to move things. And ultimately, that would be my call out to everyone on this call.
Thank you so much. And to everyone on this call, come join the revolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Come to the podcast to hear more details.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mihaela.
Thank you for your work.
Bye-bye.
To all of you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.